This Westerville woman spent the evening with her husband celebrating her birthday. The next day, she vanished.
Noble's body was found several months after she went missing, and now police say they have a suspect.
Major development in the investigation into the death of Emily Noble, her husband, Matheau Moore. He has now been charged with murder.
Making a mistake. It's a mistake.
This was clearly a homicide based on the injuries that were sustained and the mechanism of those injuries. Her body was staged to appear as though it was a suicide, and that was absolutely not the case.
A 52-year-old woman vanished on her birthday after an evening of celebration, only to be discovered 4 months later in a wooded area less than half a mile from her home. Her skeletal remains suspended from a tree branch by a USB cord. The investigation that followed would pit prosecutors against a husband who claimed innocence, forensic experts against each other, and ultimately leave a jury to decide whether Emily Noble's death was suicide or murder. Emily Noble spent her 52nd birthday on May 24, 2020, doing what she loved. The petite woman, who weighed less than 100 pounds, began her special day with her husband Matheau Moore, traveling to Buckdale to collect water from a local spring. The couple returned to their Westerville, Ohio condominium, visited the Field of Heroes Memorial, enjoyed a picnic, and ventured to several bars downtown. At Coble Grill, they snapped selfies together, capturing what appeared to be a happy couple celebrating. Emily found joy in simple pleasures. Her sister Amy Thomas described her as courageous and strong, someone who cherished nature. Emily worked for the state of Ohio and was the breadwinner, providing medical insurance for herself, her husband, and Moore's son Joey. She had accumulated $96,000 in assets, and their joint account held over $400,000, much from an inheritance Moore received after his mother's death. But beneath the surface, troubling signs existed. Suzanne Kavanaugh testified she saw bruising on Noble's arm the last time they met, and their friendship deteriorated after Kavanaugh raised concerns about the relationship. Brandy Zink recalled their mini-vacation being cut short when Moore texted that his son had committed suicide in 2019, an event Moore acknowledged had devastated him and strained their marriage. After Emily and Moore returned home on May 24th, user activity on Emily's phone ceased after 6 o'clock. Moore spoke to a friend for 30 minutes after 7:30, and constant activity appeared on his phone until 6 o'clock the following morning. What happened during those nighttime hours would become intensely scrutinized. The morning of May 25th dawned with Emily nowhere to be found. Moore discovered his wife missing from their 800-square-foot condo. She had left without her car, keys, wallet, or cell phone. Moore reported her missing that day, beginning a months-long search. Officer Robert Hollis responded to the missing person report, his body camera recording the interaction. Moore's behavior would later be described as suspicious. Despite the small space, Moore never physically searched for his wife, instead texting her and using a locator app. John Kramer, who lived across the street, told police he last saw Noble between 9 and 10 o'clock on May 25th, going for a walk. However, Kramer's testimony proved problematic, shifting throughout the investigation. He later expressed uncertainty about the date and never provided a written statement. On the witness stand, he revealed he had heard the couple arguing, details never previously mentioned. Emily's best friend Celeste Groen had visited her on May 22nd, and they walked the neighborhood foraging for plants. Groen last heard from Emily on May 24th at 6 o'clock. When Moore called saying Emily was missing, Groen came to help search. As days turned to weeks, the search intensified. Police canvassed the neighborhood using bloodhounds and cadaver dogs. The Westerville chief of police announced the area had been searched 3 times. Moore actively participated, posting flyers and reaching out to the Vanished podcast to highlight his wife's case. On September 16, 2020, nearly 4 months after Emily's disappearance, 3 women foraging in the woods made a horrific discovery. In a densely wooded area near County Line Road, they found skeletal remains in a kneeling position, suspended from a tree branch. The remains were mummified. A black USB cord was wrapped around the neck. The right hand clutched the right ankle. The left hand touched a black water bottle beside the left leg. Inside the water bottle was liquid containing 6% alcohol. An engagement ring and wedding band lay nearby. The women immediately called police. Detective Stephen Grubbs confirmed Noble was suspended by a USB cord. The scene suggested suicide by hanging, but questions emerged about whether things were what they appeared. Dental records confirmed the remains belonged to Emily Noble. but determining how she died would prove complex and controversial. The remains were so decomposed that establishing cause of death required extensive forensic analysis, marked by delays and conflicting expert opinions. Delaware County Coroner Dr. Mark Hickman, a family practice doctor who was not a forensic pathologist, evaluated the remains before requesting transport to Montgomery County Coroner's Office. Noble's remains arrived on September 17, 2020. Photographs and X-rays documented the condition. Noble wore black leggings, a tank top, a white shirt, and sneakers. An X-ray revealed an e-cigarette in the leggings pocket. Dr. Anna Castiglione Richmond determined the remains should undergo further analysis at Ohio State University. The remains were transported on October 2, 2020. Dr. Amanda Agnew conducted the forensic anthropological evaluation at OSU's Injury Biomechanics Research Center. Agnew completed her report on January 11, 2021. The report raised red flags. Agnew identified perimortem, trauma to Noble's nasal bones and throat. Most significantly, she reported bilateral fractures to the hyoid bone and thyroid cartilage, a quadruple fracture pattern that would become the prosecution's centerpiece. She noted fractures to the nasal cavity. However, portions of the hyoid bone and several toe bones were missing. The report was sent to Montgomery County, where authorities determined on January 21, 2021, that death resulted from multiple injuries to the face and neck. Before issuing a death certificate, investigators wanted another opinion from a specialist with a reputation in strangulation deaths. Dr. Bill Smock entered the case at Detective Grubbs's request. Smock was not a forensic pathologist, but described himself as a forensic physician with specialized training. He had completed a fellowship with the Kentucky Office of the Medical Examiner in 1994 and built a career testifying in high-profile cases. He claimed to have participated in thousands of autopsies and had been recognized as an expert more than 100 times. Among his notable cases were the Derek Chauvin trial and Robert Feldman, a Colorado man convicted after Smock testified the scene had been staged. Smock reviewed lab reports and examined images, but never physically examined the remains or visited the scene. His conclusions, delivered in May 2021, were definitive. He determined Emily Noble died by homicide, sustained manual strangulation, and the quadruple fracture was not consistent with hanging. He asserted Noble had facial fractures from blunt force trauma, and the scene had been staged. Smock stated a woman of Noble's size could not have suffered a quadruple throat fracture from an incomplete hanging. He claimed no woman of her size had ever had those fracture patterns from leaning into a ligature. Armed with Smock's conclusions, which Detective Grubbs called their strongest evidence, prosecutors moved forward. On June 17, 2021, a grand jury indicted Matheau Moore with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of felonious assault. On September 16, 2021, exactly 1 year after Noble's body was discovered, Coroner Hickman issued a death certificate listing homicide due to manual strangulation. The prosecution's theory painted Moore as a calculating killer who murdered his wife and staged the scene. They pointed to the troubled marriage, exacerbated by Moore's son's suicide. They emphasized Emily was the breadwinner. The prosecution theorized that on May 24, after returning home, something went wrong during a 3-hour window. When the case went to trial in August 2022 before Judge Stephen Walliver, prosecutors laid out their case. Assistant Prosecutor Mark Sleeper told Dateline that Smock's conclusions were his strongest evidence. The prosecution's theory, revealed during closing arguments, was that Moore followed Emily during a walk and killed her in the woods, then staged the scene. Prosecutors pointed to Moore's behavior as evidence of guilt. They noted his calm demeanor when police arrived, his failure to search the condo, and suspicious garage activity. They claimed Moore staged the scene even as police were present, pointing to an orange extension cord on a cooler. They implied Moore might have had the murder weapon in his pocket. The prosecution analyzed Moore's police interview, arguing he revealed guilty knowledge by referring to Emily in the past tense. They pointed to inconsistencies. Body camera footage captured Moore thinking Emily had returned, but it was her friend Celeste. Throughout the week-long trial, jurors heard from investigators, friends, and forensic experts. Chad Holcomb presented graphic photographs from the crime scene. DNA testing on the USB cord, water bottle, and Noble's clothing all came back negative. The 3 women who found the remains testified about their discovery. Friends testified about concerns regarding the relationship. Amy Thomas described her last communication with Emily and testified Moore called from Emily's phone. She revealed Moore threatened to sue Emily's family for defamation over Facebook posts. But as the prosecution built its case, significant problems emerged. Defense attorney Diane Vanishes systematically dismantled the state's theory. She revealed that despite public statements that the area had been searched 3 times, this was not accurate. The cadaver dog searched the main road and bike path, but was never sent into the woods where the body was discovered. Vanishes highlighted the complete absence of physical evidence linking Moore to the crime. DNA testing all came back negative. There was no blood evidence, no forensic evidence placing Moore at the scene, and no witnesses. The prosecution's case rested entirely on interpretation of Noble's injuries and Smock's opinion. The defense called Dr. Heather Garvin, a board-certified forensic anthropologist and professor at Des Moines University. Garvin's credentials were formidable, certified by the American Board of Forensic Anthropology. Garvin reviewed hundreds of high-resolution images and reached dramatically different conclusions. She testified that hanging should not be ruled out as a possible cause of death. Regarding the facial trauma Smock characterized as blunt force injury from the time of death, Garvin determined the fractures were healed injuries from a broken nose Emily sustained in 1983. A police report confirmed Noble had broken her nose decades earlier. More critically, Garvin challenged Smock's central claim about the hyoid bone fractures. She pointed to scientific literature contradicting his statements, noting research on hanging injuries was relatively inconclusive. She explained Smock did not understand fracture biomechanics and was misapplying research. Garvin emphasized the scientific literature showed numerous variables affecting fracture patterns, including age, bone density, body weight, and type of hanging. She noted Emily Noble was a 52-year-old woman with osteopenia, a condition making bones more fracture-prone. Garvin testified that lack of proof is not proof, and absence of evidence does not mean it cannot occur. She pointed out conflicting findings in research. Some studies suggested heavier people were more prone to fractures, while others found no correlation. Some research indicated fractures were more common with incomplete hangings, while others found the opposite. The one factor almost all researchers agreed upon was that age was significant, with more fractures in individuals over 40. The defense also called Dr. John Bolt, who specialized in biomechanical engineering. Bolt tested whether the tree branch could withstand a hanging. Using a crash dummy simulating Noble's weight and an identical USB cord, he conducted 5 tests, 2 static and 3 dynamic. All tests determined the branch did not fail. There was cord slippage in one test, but the cord did not break, contradicting suggestions the scene had been staged. During cross-examination of state witnesses, the defense exposed additional problems. Dr. Agnew admitted Noble's right nasal cavity was not actually fractured, and the other side had deformity, but it wasn't clear if fractured. This contradicted reports passed to other experts. The defense questioned Agnew's credentials, noting she was not board certified and the report had been partially written by a graduate student. When the body arrived at OSU, the Montgomery County Coroner's Office had already removed Noble's clothing and shoes, potentially disturbing evidence. A portion of the hyoid bone was missing, along with toes. Noble's molars, thought taken for DNA testing, were later found during a second crime scene search in March 2021, raising questions about investigation thoroughness. Perhaps most damaging was the revelation that every expert who testified for the state, except Dr. Agnew and her student, had never examined Noble's remains in person. The coroners and Dr. Smock relied entirely on Agnew's report and photographs. Smock never consulted with other experts before forming his opinion and only met them on the day he testified. All their reports duplicated Dr. Agnew's findings, creating a chain of experts building upon potentially flawed observations. After all testimony concluded, the defense filed a Rule 29 motion to dismiss for lack of evidence directly linking Moore to the crime. Vanishes argued that while something nefarious might have happened, the state failed to prove who committed the crime. She criticized reliance on unreliable testimony of John Kramer, whose story changed multiple times. Prosecutor Melissa Schiffel countered that Moore and only Moore was responsible. Focusing on her theory, he staged the scene while police were at the condo. But when pressed by Judge Walliver about where the murder occurred if not in the home, Schiffel admitted they did not know and it could have happened where the body was found. This revealed a fundamental weakness. Judge Walliver denied the motion, and the case proceeded to closing arguments. On the seventh day, Thursday morning began with a fiery exchange. Judge Walliver was issuing his ruling when prosecutor Mark Sleeper objected to starting without elected prosecutor Schiffel, who had an early meeting. Sleeper called it a sham, then walked out after the judge asked him to sit. The prosecution team walked back just in time to hear the ruling denying the defense's motion. In closing arguments, prosecutors revealed their belief Moore followed Emily during a walk and killed her in the woods, then staged the scene. When they detailed this theory, Moore showed visible emotion, appearing agitated and throwing up his arms. The prosecution emphasized Moore, and only Moore killed his wife. They walked the jury through the timeline, noting after returning home, Moore took a 30-minute phone call. After 9 o'clock, there was a 3-hour window in which they believed Moore murdered his wife and began staging. Prosecutors focused on Moore's behavior when police arrived. They emphasized the couple lived in an 800-square-foot condo, yet Moore never got up to look for Noble. They alleged Moore staged the garage by moving an extension cord and cooler. Prosecutors argued Moore messed up when he left a flashlight next to both items, implying the flashlight illuminated the location where Noble's remains were found. The defense countered by pointing to Moore's genuine reactions on body camera footage. When Officer Hollis arrived, Moore thought Emily had returned when he saw someone, but it was her friend Celeste. Defense counsel argued this showed Moore's genuine belief Emily might be alive. They noted Moore's immediate cooperation by turning over evidence, including Emily's phones, laptops, and personal items. Vanishes argued Moore did not kill his wife and was not the mastermind. She insisted there was no direct evidence linking her client to the crime, and prosecutors failed to meet their burden. The defense emphasized the complete absence of DNA evidence, blood evidence, or any forensic evidence placing Moore at the scene. Without physical evidence, the case relied entirely on expert opinion about cause of death, and the defense had presented compelling testimony that the state's experts had overstepped. The jury began deliberating on Thursday, August 25, 2022, and continued into Friday, August 26. After just under 3 hours of deliberations, they reached a verdict. When Judge Walliver read the verdicts, tension filled the courtroom. Count 1, felony murder, not guilty. Count 2, purposeful murder, not guilty. Count 3, felonious assault, not guilty. Matheau Moore, 52 years old, sobbed and cradled his face in his hands. After more than a year in legal limbo, facing life in prison, he had been acquitted on all charges. The jury deliberated for less time than many expected, suggesting they found the prosecution's case lacking. One juror named Connie said she knew from day one that Moore was not guilty. She stated she would never believe he killed his wife, reflecting quick consensus among the jury that the state had not proven its case. Defense attorney Vanishes spoke to media after the verdict, expressing relief. She emphasized the prosecution's case had been built on unreliable forensic evidence and speculation rather than concrete proof. The absence of physical evidence linking Moore to the crime scene, combined with conflicting expert testimony, had created reasonable doubt. But the acquittal did not end the controversy. In months following the trial, the forensic evidence came under intense scrutiny. NBC News' Dateline asked 3 additional board-certified forensic anthropologists to review forensic reports. All 3 raised serious concerns about Dr. Smock's role and conclusions. Dr. Nicholas Pasalacqua, director of forensic anthropology at Western Carolina University, said Smock makes firm authoritative statements which cannot be supported with evidence. Dr. Natalie Langley, president of the American Board of Forensic Anthropologists, expressed concern that the opinion of someone not board-certified in forensic pathology had been given this amount of weight. Dr. Marin Pillode, a professor at the University of Nevada in Reno, said the case highlights the importance of scientific standards, insofar that misinterpretations and hyperbolic statements can have serious repercussions. She emphasized it is critically important to not overstate findings. These experts also criticized methods used by the OSU lab. Dr. Pasalacqua noted that letting bones soak in hydrogen peroxide solution for 24 hours was an incorrect or outdated technique, and the lab's report offered unsupported conclusions. The low-resolution images made it difficult for reviewing experts to make definitive determinations, yet the lab issued confident conclusions adopted by every subsequent expert. In response, Dr. Smock stood by his findings in an interview with NBC News. He dismissed the anthropologist's concerns, stating he had studied strangulation and asphyxiation for nearly 4 decades. Smock maintained that Emily Noble's hyoid bone fracture did not come from hanging, but from strangulation. He defended his expertise, noting he teaches asphyxiation-related deaths to the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, judges and prosecutors worldwide. Dr. Amanda Agnew, the OSU lab director, defended her laboratory's practices. She explained the hydrogen peroxide concentration was low at 2%, and the goal was to preserve skeletal remains, especially difficult given the mummified condition. She emphasized she and a co-author were the only ones who examined the remains in person, and other anthropologists were likely unable to see what they saw. She clarified that to remain unbiased, she had not communicated with Smock after he was brought into the case. The case became more than a criminal trial. It evolved into a broader conversation about forensic science standards, the weight given to expert testimony, and the danger of experts overstepping their expertise. Defense attorney Vanishes summed it up: garbage in, garbage out. If the initial forensic analysis is flawed, every conclusion built upon it becomes suspect. For Matheau Moore, the acquittal brought freedom but not complete resolution. The case wiped him out financially, and he was forced to move from the home he shared with Emily. Moore acknowledged knowing some people still believed he killed his wife despite the jury's decision. The question of what actually happened to Emily Noble on May 24 or 25, 2020, remains officially unanswered. The jury found the prosecution had not proven beyond reasonable doubt that Moore killed his wife, but that determination did not establish what did occur. Did Emily Noble, struggling after her stepson's suicide and difficulties in her marriage, walk into the woods and take her own life? Did someone else encounter her and harm her? Or did something else happen? Emily Noble's family continues to grieve, left without definitive answers. Her sister Amy and friends remember a woman who loved nature, who found joy in foraging, who celebrated her birthday with optimism despite difficulties. They remember someone who deserved better than to be found 4 months later, suspended from a tree in woods she loved. The case remains one of Ohio's most controversial, a reminder that even with advanced forensic science, some truths remain elusive, and justice can be as uncertain as it is essential.